I used to think the scariest thing in the woods was a bear, or maybe some lunatic who's been living off the grid too long, looking for trouble. But I was wrong. There's something worse out there, something watching from above, hidden behind stars and clouds and the rustle of trees. I saw it one night while hiking the Appalachian Trail through Maine, deep in the 100-mile wilderness. I still don't sleep more than 2 hours a night, and when I do, I dream about lights. It was late October, the kind of cold where the frost creeps into your boots before dawn. I was alone. I liked it that way. I'd been on the trail for nearly 2 weeks, headed northbound, trying to reach the Baxter State Park boundary by the end of the month. Most through hikers were long gone. The trail was quiet, deserted, just me and the forest. That night, I camped near a ridge south of Whitecap Mountain, a place thick with moss-draped spruce and towering birch trees. I'd made a fire, eaten a freeze-dried chili pouch, and sat back with my headlamp off, watching the canopy sway in the wind. It started with a humming, low, like a distant diesel engine, but steadier, almost musical. I thought it was in my head at first. Then the trees began to vibrate. You know that awful metallic shudder you hear when a truck brakes hard on a wet road? That's what it reminded me of, only constant and coming from above. I stepped away from the fire and looked up. There were no stars, none, just a wide black shape blotting out the sky. At first, I didn't even register that it was moving. It hovered directly above the treetops, absolutely silent now. No engine, no wind, nothing, just presence. Then the lights came on, 5 of them, like searchlights, beaming down in perfect circles, not white like a helicopter's. These were bluish, and they didn't illuminate so much as distort. Where the light touched the forest floor, the leaves shimmered and pulsed like they were underwater. The very air twisted, thickening in those patches. My breath caught. I dropped to the ground, crawling toward a boulder and peeking out. It wasn't a drone. It wasn't a plane. It didn't belong in our sky. And then I saw them, figures within the beams, humanoid, but too tall, thin like branches, jointed wrong. They moved as if swimming through the air, suspended in those columns of light. I remember their skin, if you can call it that. It glowed faintly, the same sickly blue as the beams, like bioluminescent jellyfish. I counted 3, no 4. One had something in its hand, a long tool or wand, and it was using it to scan the ground. Every time it pointed it at a tree, the bark split open with a faint hiss, revealing the pulpy insides. They were dissecting the forest. I wanted to scream, but my mouth was locked. My limbs refused to move. A pressure built behind my eyes. Something was inside my mind, listening. I tried to crawl away, inching backward on my stomach, but the moment I moved, the closest beam jerked sideways and landed directly on me. Everything went silent. Not quiet. Silent. Even the wind stopped. My ears popped. I felt weightless, my body tingling as though every molecule was being pulled apart and held in suspension. Then I was lifted. I don't remember the transition. 1 second I was on the ground, and the next I was inside something. Not a ship in the way you'd imagine. No walls, no floors. Just a vast blackness filled with symbols, glowing geometric shapes, rotating slowly in midair. The air was warm but sterile. I floated, paralyzed. Below me, or maybe beside me, was a long table made of mirror-like metal. Something writhed beneath its surface, trapped behind the sheen. The figures circled. They weren't walking. They moved without motion, just blinking from place to place like corrupted video frames. One tilted its head, staring straight into me. No eyes, just a smooth, elongated skull. And yet, I knew it was seeing everything, my memories, my thoughts, the color of fear blooming inside me like spilled ink. Then came the voice, not out loud, inside me, like a thought that wasn't mine. You are the signal. I don't know what that meant. I didn't want to understand, but I felt something press into the base of my skull, like a sharp, cold needle sliding into my brainstem. A flash of red, then white. The next thing I knew, I was back on the trail, lying in the mud. Hours had passed. My campfire was dead, my gear strewn across the clearing. My compass was shattered. My GPS watch displayed nonsense symbols. I tried to stand, but vomited immediately, my body convulsing. The inside of my head felt rewired, wrong. Everything echoed. Even my heartbeat felt foreign. I should have left then, should have run back south and flagged down the first ranger I could find. But I kept walking, not because I was brave, because I had to. For the next 3 days, I hiked without seeing another person. But I wasn't alone. I'd see the trees shift at night, branches bending as if something massive moved between them. Once, I saw a flash of blue light blink through the canopy, and I swear the shadows under the leaves reshaped themselves to follow me. At night, I heard it again, the humming. Not overhead this time. Inside me. A low thrum that made my bones itch. I started getting nosebleeds. I couldn't keep food down. I'd wake up with bloody handprints on my pack, my hands. But I don't remember doing it. The worst part came on the 5th night. I had made it within a day's hike of Baxter State Park. I set up camp just off the trail, near a mossy boulder shaped like a hunched man. I had started to fall asleep, wrapped in my sleeping bag, when I heard whispers, not speech, memory. They were replaying my own voice, snippets of conversations from years ago, things I'd said to my father, my ex, a hiking buddy who died 2 years back. The voices layered and overlapped, becoming one unbearable static. I opened my eyes. The lights were back, but they weren't above me this time. They were in me. Blue lines traced across my forearms, pulsing with light beneath my skin like veins of fire. I screamed, not out of pain, but because I realized what the voice had meant. You are the signal. They'd marked me. I was some kind of beacon, a carrier. I don't remember finishing the trail. I don't remember exiting the forest. The next thing I truly remember is waking up in a hospital bed in Millinocket, surrounded by white walls and confused nurses. They said I was found walking down a logging road naked, covered in scratches and blood. But not a drop of it was mine. No one believed me. But I see the signs now, in radio static, in the patterns of tree bark, in the slow, precise way certain clouds move when no one's looking. And sometimes, when I close my eyes, I hear them whispering again, not from the sky, from inside. I'd always been drawn to the desert, not the sprawling, sun-baked wasteland most people imagine, but the strange stillness that seeps into your bones, the kind of silence that feels ancient and waiting, like the earth itself is holding its breath. Back in the early 2000s, when the internet was still a novelty and cell phones were barely smart, I needed to get away from everything, the noise, the flashing lights of Las Vegas, the endless hum of human chaos. So I packed a small backpack, printed out some maps, and set out into the Mojave Desert to hike alone. The first day was brutal heat and relentless sun. The desert was an oven, and the sand beneath my boots radiated a dry, fiery pulse. I'd gone in late spring, hoping to avoid the worst summer heat, but the sun was merciless. My water ran low fast, and I realized just how small and vulnerable I was out there. Yet, beneath the physical exhaustion, there was a thrill, an unspoken promise that something raw and pure waited beyond the horizon. By the second day, the terrain flattened out, and I wandered into a vast basin framed by jagged red rocks, the kind of place that felt untouched by man or time. Around noon, as I rested beneath a boulder, my skin baking in the hot sun, I noticed a strange shimmer on the far side of the basin. At first, I thought it was a mirage, heat waves bending the air like liquid. But as I stared, the shimmer didn't flicker or distort like a typical mirage. It held steady, too perfect, too precise. Curiosity gnawed at me. I dropped my pack and started walking toward it. The closer I got, the stranger the air felt. It was heavier, like I was wading through invisible molasses. The usual dry desert breeze was gone, replaced by an eerie stillness that pressed on my skin and rattled my bones. My mouth went dry, and my heart thudded loud enough to drown out all other sound. Then I saw it, half buried in the cracked, parched earth, gleaming under the unforgiving sun, was a craft unlike anything I'd ever seen. It was a perfect sphere, roughly the size of a small car, its surface impossibly smooth and black, like a giant drop of oil spilled and frozen mid-fall. It reflected the sky and desert around it like a mirror, but its edges rippled with a strange shimmer, as if the very fabric of reality bent near it. I swallowed hard, a mix of awe and fear squeezing my chest. As I stepped closer, an invisible boundary seemed to thicken the air itself. A buzzing hum thrummed through my skull, low and omnipresent. I blinked, and suddenly my vision blurred, colors bleeding at the edges like wet paint. My stomach clenched in a knot, bile rising hot and bitter to my throat. I staggered, nearly dropping my pack. My skin prickled, crawling with an electric chill that made the hairs on my arms stand up. I felt sick, deeply, physically ill, but I couldn't tear my eyes away from the ship. It was as if some silent force was pulling me forward, warping my senses. I reached out an unsteady hand, trembling with adrenaline and revulsion. The moment my fingers hovered inches from the smooth surface, the nausea crashed over me like a tidal wave. My head spun violently, and my knees buckled beneath me. I collapsed onto the cracked desert floor, gasping and choking. My body convulsed with waves of dizziness and weakness. I wanted to scream, but my throat felt clogged with sand and shadow. The humming turned into a low, resonant vibration that seemed to sync with the pounding in my chest. I could feel it deep inside my bones, like the desert itself was alive and watching me, hungry. Somewhere behind me, in the flickering edge of my vision, I sensed movement. A shadow slipped past the jagged rocks, tall and impossibly thin, darker than the black craft itself. It moved with unnatural grace, almost liquid, and vanished before I could focus on it. A faint rustling whispered through the dry brush, like breath on the wind. Panic swallowed my reason. I scrambled backward, stomach heaving, eyes darting. The nausea worsened, twisting into something more violent. A burning sensation that crawled through my veins and numbed my limbs. My skin felt too tight, then suddenly cold and clammy. A wave of vertigo made the desert spin and pulse around me. I ran blindly, stumbling over sharp rocks and dry bushes, my breath ragged and shallow. I didn't dare look back. When I finally collapsed beneath the scant shade of a mesquite tree hours later, my body shook uncontrollably. My face was pale and slick with sweat. The sickness lingered like a curse, a poison that refused to leave. And yet, I heard it again. Soft, deliberate footsteps echoing just beyond the tree line, circling me in the desert quiet. I scanned the empty landscape, heart pounding, but saw nothing but rock and sand. That night, under a sky smeared with stars, sleep fled me. In the black silence of my tent, I was haunted by nightmares. The ship glowed faintly in my dreams, its black surface rippling with dark light. The shadowy figure came closer, eyes gleaming with cold hunger, voice a whisper inside my mind, promising secrets and madness. I woke to a world that felt warped, as if the desert itself had shifted overnight. The sickness remained. Every step I took back toward civilization was agony, every breath a battle. By the time I stumbled onto the highway, I was barely human, hollow-eyed, trembling, and racked by waves of nausea that no doctor could explain. I never returned to that desert basin, but some nights, when the wind shifts just right, I swear I can hear the low hum, a reminder that the black ship waits, patient and hungry, somewhere just beyond the horizon. I never expected to inherit anything from my Uncle Lenny. He was the sort of guy who drifted through life like a beer can in a drainage ditch, rusted, forgotten, and probably leaking something toxic. But when I got the call from a lawyer that he'd died and left me his house in the Chisholm neighborhood of East Lansing, I was stunned. I hadn't seen the man in 15 years, and back then, he only came around when he needed to borrow money or a place to crash. Still, I was between jobs and short on rent, so I figured I'd drive down from Traverse City and check it out. Worst case, I'd sell the place to some developer who wanted to gentrify the neighborhood. Best case, I don't know. Maybe I'd find some closure. Chisholm Street looked like it had once aspired to be a friendly place. The houses were all post-war one-story bungalows, rotting at the eaves and spray-painted in various shades of defeat. I counted 3 stray dogs, 2 busted streetlights, and one guy who stared at my car until I parked, then turned and vanished into a boarded-up house. Uncle Lenny's place was at the far end, where the road gave up and turned into cracked gravel. The siding was curled and yellow, the chain-link fence sagged like a dying spider web, and the front yard was a chaos of weeds, beer cans, and broken plastic flamingos. The mailbox had the word Fairbank spray-painted on it in black. I let myself in with the key the lawyer had mailed me. Inside, it smelled like mildew, cigarettes, and old meat. I gagged and opened the windows. Dust floated through shafts of sunlight, and I heard something scurry under the couch. But what caught my attention was the garage door at the end of the narrow hallway. It was locked with 3 heavy-duty padlocks, all newer than anything else in the house. The door frame had been reinforced with steel plating. It didn't match. Everything else in the house was falling apart, but this door looked like it had been installed by someone who expected serious trouble. I felt that lizard part of my brain twitch, curiosity, dread, excitement. I searched the house for keys, turning over drawers, emptying out coffee cans full of screws and keys and paper clips. After almost 2 hours, I found a small metal box duct taped to the underside of the kitchen sink. Inside were the keys. The locks came off with heavy clunks, and I braced myself for rats, mold, or some meth-cooking nightmare. Instead, I opened the garage door and froze. There was something under a massive tarp in the center of the garage. Something round, metallic, and not from here. The garage had been expanded out into the backyard with aluminum siding and insulated panels. Heavy-duty lights hung from a beam above, and power cords snaked everywhere. I stepped in slowly, feeling like an intruder in my own skin. The object under the tarp was about 30 feet wide, low to the ground, and perfectly circular. I gripped the edge of the tarp and pulled it back. Underneath was a craft, sleek metallic gray, the surface rippling like oil in moonlight. It had no visible seams, no rivets. The top was domed with dark, slightly reflective glass. A cockpit, at least that's what I thought. The craft rested on 3 prong-like legs, slightly indented into the concrete floor. I circled it, heart pounding in my ears. My mind couldn't catch up with what I was seeing. This wasn't some hobbyist's project. It was too perfect, alien. There was a hatch on the side, a sort of ovular seam with no handle. I reached out to touch it, and it responded. The seam glowed faintly and hissed open, revealing a short tunnel lined with that same mirror-like metal. A pale blue light pulsed from inside. I ducked in, my breath shallow, and crawled into the heart of the thing. The interior was cold and sterile, yet not lifeless. The walls were slightly translucent, pulsing gently with veins of soft light. There were no chairs or visible controls, but grooves along the walls shimmered when I brushed my fingers near them, like it was responding to my presence. The center chamber had a single large indentation, like a shallow bowl lined with something smooth and dark. It reminded me of a sensory deprivation tank, but no signs of life. No clothes, food, no markings, no pilot. I stared through the glass dome. From inside, the world outside looked warped, distant. Colors bled together like a watercolor left in the rain. That's when I realized the dome wasn't reflecting my face back at me. The thing staring at me from the other side of the dome wasn't me. It looked like me. Same face, same clothes. But its eyes weren't right. They were too wide, too flat. Its smile was just a little too slow, too deliberate, sealed behind me with a soft hiss. I lay there on the garage floor, gasping, my mind fracturing in a dozen directions. When I finally staggered to my feet, I locked the garage again, padlocks snapping shut like prison doors. That night, I tried to sleep in the house, but I couldn't. Every creak made me flinch. Every shadow looked like a shape shifting just out of focus. I kept seeing that face in the dome, mocking me with its slight, unnatural grin. The next day, I contacted a guy I knew, Rob, an ex-Air Force contractor who used to deal in special salvage. Told him I found something I couldn't explain. Sent him blurry pictures of the exterior. He called me within 5 minutes. "Burn the house," he said. "Walk away. Don't talk to anyone else. Don't look inside it again." I didn't tell him I already had. He hung up before I could say more. I stayed one more night. Just one. I don't know why. Maybe I thought I could understand it, get answers. Maybe I was just being stupid. Around midnight, I heard something from the garage. A metallic clang, then a slow scraping, like claws on concrete. I grabbed the only weapon I had, an old hammer, and crept down the hall. My pulse was pounding, every hair on my arm standing straight up. I put my ear to the door. Silence. Then, a whisper. I swear to God I heard a voice say, "Let me in." I backed away. I didn't sleep that night. I left at dawn and didn't look back. The house is still there, last I checked. I get mail from the city every few months. They want me to clean it up or sell it. I ignore them because I saw something that doesn't belong on this earth, something waiting, and I think that thing in the dome wasn't a reflection. It was a copy, a placeholder, and maybe it's still inside, or maybe it got out. All I know is this: sometimes, late at night, I dream of that face. Not the one I saw in the dome. The one I saw in the mirror the morning I left Chisholm Street. And it smiled back at me first.